Welcome back to the KRUSE podcast. What's up, Tony?
Good morning. Good morning, Taylor.
That's kind of the morning you're having, right?
It seems
at least a slow start. It's going to be a great day, but
so for the listeners, I'm in bed and I get a text from Taylor. He's like, "Hey man, I'm here." And somehow I had slept through my alarm and just I was in the space where I was like, I didn't even realize it was Monday, it's that kind of thing. So here we are, a couple minutes late by the grace of Taylor.
Yeah, maybe unconsciously too. You were like, I wonder if Taylor's coming tomorrow, because I messaged you last night and was like, our whole family's getting sick. I don't know if this is going to work out.
I think that's probably part of it. My brain is just like, oh, he's sick. Yeah. So Alicia's not here with us today, unfortunately, for the Q&A, which is a bummer, but we'll get her back on. But basically what happened was we started having a cold kind of sweep through the family, and I'm doing pretty good. I thought I might be getting it. Hopefully I'm, dodging it, but I did get under the weather a little bit yesterday and the day before. But Alicia, probably a little bit more than me, and then our daughter stayed home from school. So Alicia is with our daughter. So yeah, unfortunately, I'll just be doing the Q&A solo, but we'll do another joint Q&A again. Yeah. It's always so fun to get her on the podcast and just kind of get the full KRUSE Elite experience here on the podcast. I enjoy that a lot. Also, hearing your story about her needling your butt and just the two of you chatting, it was great. Yeah. All right, so I think we should just dive in.
Let's do it.
We've got a Q&A episode, and I want to thank everybody again for sending in their questions. We've got questions today from social media, but also from the dojo.
Yeah,
so that's pretty exciting too.
Straight from our community.
All right, let's start off with one that may seem a little bit out of left field.
Okay.
This is from Anne-Louise Kronlov. How can you use applied neurology for depression?
Yeah, this is, I get this more than you would think, actually, especially in DMs through Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
So this is it's not within my scope to say to somebody, I'm going to help you with your depression using applied neuro. So keep that in mind. But I will tell you, I'll tell you some things based on theory and based on my own experience, with just observing clients, right? Because sometimes in working with people using neuro, you see their behavior change, you see their affect change, you see improvements in depression or anxiety as kind of a byproduct of doing all of the things that your testing told you to do, which is kind of cool. So when we sort of look at the neurology of depression, there's obviously a lot there to unpack. Very simply put, some of the areas of the brain that would be really interesting to us to focus on would be like the frontal lobe, as well as the insular lobe, right? And we have episodes on both, I believe, if people want to go a little bit deeper there. And the tip I'm going to describe as far as like applied neuro goes is that a lot of times when you give somebody a lot of good frontal lobe activation, they feel better. It's very, very common to see that. And it's also worth saying that, kind of like we always talk about, your fuel has to be in a really good place. You cannot expect to apply neuro if you don't have the foundations to support the immediate changes that generally happen. All right, so that's really important. You got to be on top of your nutrition and make sure that you have those foundations. If you have those foundations, a lot of frontal lobe activation goes a really long way here, and people usually feel better. Same with insular lobe activation. It kind of depends. I've seen it just depends on the person. and their history, and you might choose more of a kind of insular direction versus frontal lobe. Sometimes they end up kind of overlapping. But getting good frontal lobe activation means that you're going to do a lot of good cerebellar training that really requires a high level of coordination. So that's one idea, just because, the cortex is heavily involved in that. It's not just about the cerebellum. You can also try things like visual saccades. Those are the exercises where you jump your eyes back and forth. It's not a tracking movement, like you're not following the movement, but you're jumping your eyes from one target to another. That's what we call a saccade, and those are a very strong stimulus for the frontal lobe as well. So that's kind of a key vision drill when we're thinking about the frontal lobe. There's also, if you look further into it, like any kind of cognitive load during exercise can be quite good. And remember, the frontal lobe's all about like executive decision or executive functions. So there's really what it ends up being is you end up doing a lot of cortical work because there's so much overlap between the lobes. And if you can get enough of it, usually you can move the needle. Yeah, but again, remember, this is assuming that fuel is in check. Because if you're battling fuel issues and chronic inflammation or breathing dysfunction, it's hard to get changes in something like depression when those other things are kind of getting in the way.
Mm-hmm. I'm imagining this is sort of like exercise itself, I know, makes me feel better on average, day in and day out.
Yeah.
And if I don't exercise, I notice I can get myself into a funk pretty quickly after a while. So
right.
I imagine that this is sort of like that, in that we're stimulating something in the brain, and that's just helpful. But the connection I was curious about with the cortex specifically is, this is where our executive function is, right? Like people say it's like the rational part of the brain. When you're doing visual saccades, I imagine it's activating the frontal cortex and not just like the occipital region in the back, right? Because you're making decisions on targeting. Like you're deciding to move your eye to target this, and then you're deciding to do that. What I'm getting at is if you are ruminating and you're stuck in a negative thought loop, that, getting your brain into doing something else, thinking about something else, stimulating it in a different way might be helpful for that. What do you think about that connection?
Yeah, so there's definitely something there. Anytime we do heavy loads of heavy amounts of cortical work, you're essentially improving inhibition, right? So there's the inhibition of some of those first brain type responses that are more of the kind of unwanted things, impulsive things, reflexive things. The more you can activate the cortex, the more you can have better inhibition. So that's definitely one idea. Also, you can't really separate, when it comes to movement, you can't really separate the cerebellum from the cortex because they're both involved in voluntary movement. And the cerebellum actually has been shown to be involved with inhibiting unwanted thoughts. So there's some interesting stuff there too. So again, it's movement is good at this by design, right? And I want to make sure too that people realize that the bare bone basics like strength training go so far with feeling better if you're dealing with depression. It's just that you got to get yourself to the strength training session. And you have to get started, and that's really where people struggle when they're having behavior change issues and depression. They cannot get the process started. But if you can find a way to do that, you'll probably notice you feel better. Strength training, unbelievable stimulus for the cortex, right? It's all voluntary movement. Yeah, it's so spread out. You get activation in so many different key areas. Strength training, like, do not forget, it's common for us to sort of chuckle sometimes because applied neuro is amazing and we get so nerdy about these specific structures. But like at the end of the day, general strength training is a very strong stimulus for lots of things, lots of structures that we're always talking about. So do not forget that. It's typically the combination of things that you do that move the needle the most. So I could give you just visual saccades, and that might not be nearly as powerful for somebody as if you started doing some visual saccades, but then you also started strength training twice a week. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't compete with those combinations of things. You change your nutrition a little bit. Oh my gosh, now it's starting to really move the needle. It's never one thing. That's important for people to know.
Mm-hmm. That cascade effect we're talking about sometimes, it's almost like you want to get that moving in the right direction and build those little habits, and they all add up.
That's the thing, because usually when you make one change that gives you something positive, right? It's a catalyst for making another change. And then that's a catalyst for making another change. And then you start getting motivated by your own result, right? Because motivation's not there. Like, people have a totally wrong idea of what motivation is. You know, people assume that others that are, getting a lot of this stuff done on a regular basis are motivated. I've hardly ever met anybody motivated, really, when it came to like fitness. Mm-hmm. It's different than what people realize. It's like those of us who are consistently exercising are using the same strategy to do that day in and day out that someone else uses to brush their teeth. It's the same strategy. You're just at a point where you just do it. And when you're depressed and you're that is interfering with starting the process, that's really hard. So you look for one small change to be a catalyst for something else. And then little by little, you keep following that progress. It's like motivating you to find the next thing, right? So it could be that those visual saccades are the catalyst, right? Or it could be that just going outside and taking a walk around the block is the catalyst, right? And that's so important to know that.
Thinking about neuro, I was sort of wondering if you were going to talk about the parasympathetic system at all.
Yeah,
mostly because anxiety and depression sometimes go hand in hand, right?
If the words used were anxiety, I probably would have. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I probably would have talked about like sometimes in a state of anxiety, inhibiting sympathetics can be quite useful, right? So we're looking at like other parasympathetic type drills to kind of down regulate. It's not always the answer, because it's really interesting. Sometimes people need the opposite. Mm-hmm. They actually need to activate their sympathetics more. And you sort of just learn that through testing and evaluating people and observing them and taking histories and stuff. But I would say more often it's strategies for kind of down regulating in that state.
Mm-hmm. When you're working with someone, I'm curious if you're ever thinking about or talking about depression specifically, or is this more just sort of an observation that you've gleaned over the years?
Yeah, in the work that I do, it is usually an observation, after I get to know somebody enough, and if they share it, and then I consider that when someone shares it with me, I consider that sort of like permission to discuss it a little. If it's not shared, I don't. Right. And it's not something that I actually need to necessarily know a lot about. All right. It's usually you can figure that out, right, through behaviors as you get to know somebody. And then that's kind of neat. Like, as you take somebody through a process, this is assuming that the client is a follow-up client, right? You can kind of witness this little transformation over time where their affect is changing and their behaviors are changing from being, able to put in that work. And yeah, so just kind of depends.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. This question is from Miss Kawaramani. When is stretching actually indicated and therapeutic? And I think this is a particularly good one for you because I know your history with stretching isn't always very rosy, right?
Yeah. So it kind of depends on. So the word therapeutic was used. So, if I had the opportunity, I would ask this person to elaborate a little bit more, just so I could understand like what were they really thinking of in their mind in terms of like what would stretching be good for, right? Because with stretching, and this is assuming that we're talking about traditional stretching, like what the general population considers stretching, because there are different types of stretching. The general population as a whole does not know that, right? They don't know the technicalities of what makes this form of stretching different from another form of stretching. So when we talk traditional stretching, we're basically talking about bringing a joint and muscles to an end range of motion somewhat more passively, where you're relaxing into a posture or a position to achieve that stretching sensation in that body area, right? That's traditionally how you would look at stretching. And the traditional thought process for doing that is that if you do that, those muscles get longer. And if those muscles get longer, because you should be looser from longer muscles, that means you would feel better from it, right? That is so far off, it's not even funny. You don't stretch your muscles and get longer muscles. It's like you could, if you really dive into like what is known in the science of stretching, you could even argue what I just said to some degree, because like there is even research saying that stretching, when done enough, actually can create some levels of hypertrophy, which is really interesting. I've seen some stuff on that, but I don't want to go too far into the weeds. We're going to go back to what is considered traditional stretching. When is it indicated? The first thing I'll say is, generally speaking, traditional stretching is a terrible tool for dealing with pain. I would say of everything I've tried in the last 20 some odd years, stretching is the worst tool I have ever tried. I mean, nothing even compares to how bad stretching is as a tool for pain, generally speaking. And I have had a few experiences where someone stretched and it helped them with pain. Okay, so let's just be clear on that. But generally speaking, it is so far, it just is lousy. It just, there's so many things that are better. Okay, so it depends on the goal. So if the goal is pain, it's a lousy tool. There's a lot of other things you should do. I mean, most of the time people having pain issues have threat-based issues, threat associated with the area where they're feeling pain. And when you go and stretch an area that already feels threatened, usually your brain goes, stop that. Like maybe you've had an overstretch injury. Well, stretching an overstretch injury is not a good idea. Your brain's going to go, stop that. This already got overstretched. Now you're using the mechanism of injury to try to fix it. That kills me, that one, because I see that all the time. People are like, oh, I pulled my adductor and it feels tight. Common, right?
Yeah,
what you feel, tension. Protective tension. And then you go and you stretch it out and you get a little bit of relief at first. And now you're getting tricked. Now you're getting seduced into this game of chasing the tension with stretching. And so you keep stretching it. And then all of a sudden it doesn't feel so good anymore. And, maybe that overstretch injury is tired of you trying to use the mechanism for the injury to try to solve the problem. Okay. So you see that a lot. So with overstretch injuries, certainly not a great tool. Now, the words used in the question were therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
So it just you'd have to kind of dive into, what does the person mean by therapeutic? Did they mean pain? I don't know. What if they mean just feel good?
Mm-hmm.
What if therapeutic means just, hey, I want to get a feel good therapeutic result from doing this? And if that's the case, stretching could be a stimulus that helps a person feel better. You have to make sure you're not abusing it. And the problem with stretching is people abuse it constantly because they use it to chase tension in their body. So it's misapplied all the time. And if you keep chasing tension in your body with stretching, usually it doesn't go very well, right? Now, if you did not abuse it and you knew how to listen to your body and maybe keep stretch sensations, let's say sort of minimal to medium, whatever that is, let's call it a 3 to 5 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
And you knew the difference between neural tension and muscular tension, which there is a degree of difference when you're feeling that, because a lot of times people chase neural tension with stretching. And what they accidentally do is put themselves into an aggressive nerve tensioner,
mm-hmm.
and they keep stretching. And then their brain goes, hey, would you stop yanking on this nerve? It's already irritated. And then maybe it doesn't go so well, right? So therapeutically, I could see it being useful. It is a strong insular stimulus, very strong insular stimulus, which is why people that generally have insular histories get addicted to stretching. These are people that literally become stretchaholics because they're seeking a stimulus. They're seeking an insular-based stimulus. And when you stretch your muscles and you get that sustained stretch feeling in your muscles and connective tissues, and you get all that C fiber activation, that can be very therapeutic feeling for somebody that needs insular activation. But then the whole thing is, are you doing it in a way that is healthy without overdoing it? Okay, so when we start kind of moving towards, is stretching good for performance? In my experience, it's up and down. Like it's hard to get super clear on this. Stretching can be used for performance reasons, but I'll put it this way: if you're only doing traditional stretching and you're not doing a form of stretching or combining your stretching with other things that build motor control, you're going to find yourself in either a place where you're not getting results or your risk for injury could potentially go up because you're trying to improve range of motion without filling in the motor control in the process. So basically what that means is, if you think about this, any range of motion that you can access with momentum, but you lack the motor control to be there, increases your risk for injury. So that's why coordination work is the most important thing to include with stretching. And a lot of the different types of stretching actually combine it. So it's, again, we're talking more traditionally, relax into a posture or range of motion. We're calling that traditional stretching. If you're only doing that, the performance improvements there are not nearly what they could be. And it is possible your risk could go up for injury. So it didn't really sound like I had a lot of great things to say about stretching, did it? It just, again, it depends on the style. And here, let's just say it this way. I do not traditionally stretch. And if I thought there was value in it, I would. Because I spent time messing with that for a while. I also spent time as an athletic coach for a while and spent time statically stretching my own body as an athlete. And nobody was improving. It just wasn't happening because it wasn't the right combinations of stuff. It's never one thing, right? It's what are you putting together to equal, something that's going to help you improve. It's never just the stretching that's going to provide any kind of result. So keep it in mind. We have to combine things. It's not to say you can't traditionally stretch if you like that feeling, but you have to be careful not to abuse it, not to chase neural tension. And can you complement it with other things like strength training through a full range of motion, joint mobilizations that teach motor control through full ranges of motions or awkward ranges of motion? That's the key if you want stretching to give you something.
Yeah. I do think there's a trend in like the mobility space, I'll call it, towards more active stretching and like using muscle control in stretch and not just the older like passive stretching, kind of the layman's stretching model. And then I was thinking about yoga too, and I was like, yeah, they're definitely doing motor control and like holding these poses that require a lot of muscular control, right? In order to get into these positions. It's not a stretching class, if you will.
It's just, well, really so it depends. It depends on the instructor and the style, and like things are so like all over the place these days.
That's fair.
Yeah, it's hard to, it's hard to say. You know, the trend that we've seen in the last 10 years is yoga instructors that used to be more traditionally teaching just stretching have all become like more like movement specialist based, and they're sort of now they're overlapping into other arenas and learning more about motor control and strength, and that's quite useful. And so we're seeing sort of a blend, which is how it should be, right? If you're going to be a coach, like don't be over devoted to one thing. Like, don't do that, right? That's how we all start. I did that. But eventually you get to a point where you're like, oh, Bruce Lee was right. You know, I forget how he said it. It's a famous quote, but it's like something about absorb. Yeah, you got it?
I think I got you. It's like take what is useful,
discard what is not,
and make it your own or something. Yes, like that.
Something like that. It's like, oh, Bruce, thank you. Bruce Lee was right? Don't be over devoted to one thing. Right? There's so much out there, and it's never one thing, right? Just putting things together, creating what you like. And I see that, you know, that is a trend in movement now, which is great, right? If you're a coach and an instructor, you're going to put your own kind of style on things, and that's good.
The only thing I'm going to embellish on here, I guess, is that insular part of the stretch that you described. And I was thinking in terms of proprioception as well. But just getting someone who's never moved around very much and having them try to touch their toes or sit down on the ground and reach for their ankle and maybe get in a position that they haven't, like it might not be the stretching actually, but it might just be moving your body around in different positions that might be helpful to someone, right? And you can probably achieve that through other more targeted means, right? But
yeah, it's a good call. I mean, especially when you're thinking about like getting someone moving, kind of a novice, someone who hasn't had a lot of exposure. I mean, here's the thing. Stretch sensation, you need to be exposed to it to train it, right? It is a sensory stimulus that, and this gets a little bit nerdier, you know, again, going towards what we know about the insula and people who need insular work. A lot of times people who are lacking body awareness, and I don't just mean someone who's untrained and has kind of some coordination issues. I mean, some people lack body awareness to the point where, you know, I've had people tell me in health histories before where they feel like their body is not their own, right? It's more extreme than just having like a coordination issue. And things that produce the stretch feeling, the stretch sensation can actually help them with their proprioceptive maps in developing those maps. So there is some value there when we think about filling in and clarifying people's maps. You know, I think about how I was exposed to like gymnastics and martial arts at an early stage. And there's a lot of exposure to end range of motion in those activities. And so I mapped those early on, right? And I feel like that's beneficial, right? So looking at it kind of through the neuro lens, if you have no exposure to end range of motion and the feeling of even static stretching, well, that is a deficiency too. It's just that most of the time we can get that pretty naturally in most forms of movement, right? I rarely as a coach have to go after that super specifically. And I have had to do it with certain body areas for people that need insular work. And this is going into the weeds. This is not something I need to do commonly. But I have had clients that, especially in their trunk and spine area, we had to purposely create length in the body to get them to feel stretch sensation. And then we would also combine the opposite, which is what you just lengthened, we now want to shorten, and you want to learn how to contract it too. But again, filling in the maps, right? Mm-hmm. It's a part of the map.
And through that, like if you're doing the contraction, you are actively doing that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very nice. Very nice. I know it's not your favorite topic, so
actually, I like educating about stretching. Yeah, I like it. I feel like it's valuable for people to learn because stretching will never go away, and it's just what I mean by that is the general population will always look to stretching as the only means of mobility, and so it's actually an important thing to discuss.
Awesome. All right. This one is from Rachel, and this is from the dojo.
Okay.
On the surface, it seems our systems are incredibly sensitive. If moving our head or eyes in a certain direction or seeing the horizon line going one direction versus another can send our bodies into protection mode. Is it just by strategically exposing ourselves to these variances that we increase our tolerance?
Okay, so we'll start by saying moving your eyes in a certain direction or your head or whatever it is should not cause problems, right? This is important for people to hear because a lot of people that find neuro have a sensitive nervous system. It shouldn't make you worse. Moving your eyes to the right or the left or moving your head up and down should not make you worse. But for some people, it does. And there is a level of sensitivity to especially more isolated movements with the head and the eyes. We see that quite a bit. In our courses, we talk a lot about the bottoms-up client versus the top-down client. The top-down client can tolerate a lot of activation closer to their brain, like through the visual system, through the vestibular system. And the bottoms-up client can't. Right? They're just in a place for whatever reason. Maybe it has to do with their health history. Maybe it has to do with poor metabolic health or autonomic dysregulation of some kind. Their nervous system is more on edge. There's more threat associated with it. The threat bucket, let's say, is spilling over. And then you go and you try to do isolated things like vision exercises or vestibular exercises, and you get the opposite response that you want. This is the bottoms-up client. What you're learning is that starting with activations from the neck up is not the right idea for them. We have to start from, let's say, the feet and work our way up. So we start focusing on proprioception or maybe even more integrated styles of exercise, more gross movement instead of isolated movement. Sometimes this is the solution for finding entry points for somebody that is that bottoms-up client. So the first point to make is that these little things that we like to do and test, vision exercises, vestibular exercises, they shouldn't make you worse. But for some people, they do. And if they are making you worse, that's a big sign that you do need to do more of the right things and figure out what the problem is. And yes, when you can do that, eventually building your tolerance is key. But you have to find the right entry points, and you have to have the right foundation to do that higher order stuff on, right? If you're not getting enough sleep, or you have a diet that doesn't work for you and you have chronic inflammation, it's going to be hard to get that stuff to stick so that you can even find a place where now you can build your tolerance. That's the thing. It's not as easy as just, I know I can't do this. These visual saccades, moving my eyes back and forth, make me worse. It's not as easy as, well, I'll do visual saccades every single day and I'll build a tolerance. Some people can sometimes get a result generally doing it like that, but most of the time, if there's a lot of threat associated with it, it doesn't really work out well. All right, you got to have the other foundations there, and you might have to find an entry point that is further away, and then kind of gradually work your way closer to dealing with some of these higher order systems. And usually when you get to that point, you've done enough what we call threat reduction work, which is you've done enough of the stuff to kind of make your nervous system happier about the experience. And some of that higher order stuff kind of gets sorted out on its own. And what you're experiencing is that it's just less threat. Right? The more threat the nervous system perceives, the more chaotic everything is. You start seeing problems that technically don't even exist. That's why it's so hard as the coach. It's chaos, right? Because everything is dysregulated. So if you only go after the chaos and you only look at that, you're getting kind of a false read on what the primary issues actually are, because everything's trying to adjust and balance out, and you get distracted by, oh, this must be vision problems, or this must be inner ear problems, when in reality, those systems are responding to the chaos. And so enough threat reduction over time, we talk about that process being anywhere from 1 month to 1 year, sometimes more, depending on the individual. You do enough threat reduction type work, and then eventually you get to a point where it's like, oh, I'm taming the chaos. Some of those previous things that looked like vision issues or looked like vestibular issues have kind of quieted down, right? And that's kind of neat to see, right? Because everything really does interact, right, with one another.
Yeah. If someone's so sensitive to tracking their eyes in one direction, that's because there's a problem, right?
Yes.
And someone that has a fairly healthy nervous system, right? That they wouldn't find that threatening.
Right. So once in a while, I will work with somebody who's really healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, from my perspective, there's so much I still don't know, but from my perspective, their threat bucket is not spilling over. The average person I work with, their threat bucket has been annihilated, right? Just bring in the next bucket, because this one is got cracks in it, and yeah, it's just annihilated, right? But once in a while, I work with someone, they got a clean health history. They're like, I sprained my ankle twice when I was like 12. I'm like, no surgeries, no this, that, the other thing. They look pretty healthy. They move pretty well. And you start doing some of these drills with them, and maybe I do vestibular drills or vision drills or whatever, and they're like, okay, that was easy, and it's like very boring. And it's like, okay, yeah, that looks good, this looks good, and they're not impressed at all. It's like, who's this guy just having me do these easy eye movements? And on my end, I'm like, well, this is good.
Right.
I could probably say to this person, let's just train. Like, hey, grab this kettlebell. Let's get this, party started. Instead of like the person that I normally see, where it's like, okay, moving your eyes once to the left gave you a headache.
Yeah.
Awesome. let's like, can we really ignore that? Okay, smooth pursuit, in this direction made you feel nauseous, and this simple VOR drill caused you to lose your balance, and that's kind of what I'm experiencing a lot. And it's like, oh, okay, well, there's some stuff we got to figure out here, because these these basic things, right? These systems they're not working optimally, and we need them to. So yeah, it's actually useful for people to know that, yeah, you shouldn't be getting a bunch of threat responses from drills. And if you are, that in itself is a big clue that there needs to be some very specific work done.
Yeah. And then just to tie this back to the stretching conversation earlier, you were talking about how stretching can sometimes be a nerve tensioner.
Yep.
And so someone's already got a high threat bucket.
Yes.
And, especially around that area, and then they're just tensioning it more.
Yep.
It's driving threat up even more, how that could be counterproductive. It's like,
no,
we got to get it to a place where it's feeling cozy and safe. And then maybe we can introduce that resilience training.
That's right. Little by little, as you build tolerance, for sure. And that's the thing with stretching, is that most people that are using stretching as a way to feel better, a lot of them are chasing neural tension. Yeah, because the thing that makes this all very difficult, no matter what we're talking about as a modality or a tool or whatever, is that when something's wrong with the human body, your brain and nervous system's response every single time is protective. Every single time, because that's what your brain is wired for, protection, not performance. So when there's something going on, generally we feel that, or we perceive that as tension. And tension can be expressed for a number of different problems. It's not just a muscle problem. It's not just a nerve problem. Tension can be expressed for almost everything you can come up with, because tension is a state that the nervous system and brain is creating to protect you. So the problem with this, and this is why so many people get seduced into chasing tension with all the tools that we have available: stretching, foam rolling, massage, anything you can come up with, right? Is that they perceive it as tension. And in our own body, remember, even me, this is why, remember in the last Q&A, I'm telling the story of Alicia needling my piriformis, because I got, just like everyone, I got seduced into the feelings, the internal feelings I'm having are telling me that something is mechanically wrong, right? And I feel that as tension. So now I have to find these tools to try to seek and destroy the tension. And it doesn't always work, because you're removing protective stiffness that could be helping you actually functionally, which is interesting. But it also could just be a distraction, because it's the body's protective output. So we just have to ask bigger questions. Why is the body creating this protective output? Mm-hmm. And we can learn why through, testing.
Yeah. Why is it giving this person a headache? Why are they getting nauseous or losing their balance? Why do they feel a pain response or tightness?
Yes. And I have to ask myself all the time as a coach, when I'm doing all this stuff with people, I don't say this out loud, but in my mind, I'm going, am I being seduced or tricked into following this person's symptoms? I have to ask myself that constantly. And sometimes I get tricked. Sometimes I do it on purpose, because sometimes I need to do something for a symptom to help the person feel better. And I don't really care if we did anything for a primary issue, because feeling better is part of the process. We talked about feeling better being a catalyst for more. And being able to do something for someone's symptoms is still valuable. I laugh all the time, because people on Instagram who don't know me, don't know anything about what I'm doing or teaching. They don't even follow the page, but they see the posts and they're like, they see that hundreds of people in the comments are saying, this is incredible, my shoulder pain's better, whatever it is. And you get people who are like, that's so stupid. That's only going to give you temporary relief. Okay. What's wrong with that? The person that just got temporary relief didn't seem to get temporary relief the last 15 years when they tried A, B, C, D, E, F, G, it goes on. So all of a sudden I come around with a seemingly simple vision exercise, and it brings their shoulder pain from a 7 to a 1, or often a 7 to a 0. Why would you point the finger at that? That's a catalyst for something that's now we're gonna essentially teach the brain what is possible. And that's what's really key. We always say the goal is one pain-free repetition. Yeah, doesn't matter how you get there with whatever tool or drill, but one pain-free repetition is so important, because as soon as you experience a pain-free repetition, you now have an opportunity to teach the brain that 2 is possible, 2 repetitions, right? You can convince it, and then 3 and 4, and that's how the process kind of goes on. Yeah. So it's got to ask that question. Am I getting tricked here? Am I sort of getting seduced into following a bunch of systems or symptoms coming from maybe a variety of systems? And I take a step back and sort of evaluate that quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've told stories before where you were playing whack-a-mole with systems, and then you zoom out and you're like, oh, it's a fuel issue.
Exactly.
This is actually a clue. This is a sign that this is a fuel issue, and that we need to figure that out, whether it's breathing or diet or hydration or sleep or whatever that is, right?
Yeah, yeah. I like to bring that up as much as possible, because anybody out there who's done their fair share of continued education, this is typically how the continued education experience goes. You find a cool method, right? Let's say it's for pain, feeling better, performance, whatever. And you start learning this method and you start applying it, and you get some results, but then you realize my results aren't sticking. So you lurk kind of in the background, and you're seeing what's happening to other people teaching or learning this thing, and you're hearing what the instructors have to say, and time goes by and you're still experiencing that, why did this not work as good for me as it worked during the day of the seminar? And then you get to a point where you ask and they say, oh, well, that's because you haven't done level 2 certification. You're missing all the level 2 stuff, so you couldn't possibly get great results yet. You only get level 1 certified, so you pay for level 2. You go through the whole thing. You think you get pretty good at it. You understand the theory. Yeah, you get some results with some people, but then the results don't stick with this other group of people. And you lurk and you ask, and then, hey, you need level 3, right? And this is how the process goes. You don't have level 3 yet, and then finally, hey, you're not in the master's program. All right, you don't have the master's certification yet, and this is how it goes. And that's why in our first course, Foundations, we have an entire section on fuel, because no matter what you're teaching, never are you going to find everybody gets better from it. And most of the people who actually need help out there that are trying lots of different things, seeing different practitioners, they have some kind of fuel problem. Their metabolic health is preventing them from getting results that stick. So we reverse the whole thing and we teach it from day one, because we know that that's going to be very important, a learning thing for our students.
Yeah, it's such a confounding variable. It's like, how can you build upon a foundation that's unstable, right?
Exactly. That's what it is.
All right. This one is from Rachel also. She had many, many good questions for us. Do you need, or should you be assessing drills every time you do them to see if they are still giving a positive feedback? If so, how do you keep your sessions from being overtaken by assessing, especially if in the daily assessment the feedback seems not very substantial? So then it opens up all of the stacking options.
So this is all goal dependent. So in a general training environment, I'm not really assessing everything. If I'm coaching somebody and taking them through general training, I am observing their performance and using my observation skills to tell me whether or not they are in what we call the sweet spot or not. And maybe I have someone occasionally check in with some ranges of motion to make sure that they're not getting tighter as they train. Because that typically tells you that just cumulatively, like, you're kind of leaving the sweet spot and there might be a diminishing return. And I do that myself. So this has been especially important for me the last year or more, actually, where I just need to like check in with ranges of motion and stuff and make sure I'm not getting to a point where my workout is causing me to build tension, because if I do that, there's always a diminishing return for me based on the extra stress that I've been under for the last few years. Mm-hmm. And so that's one way to look at it. And so that is not fanatical reassessment. All right. But if your goal is pain related, you have to use fanatical reassessment. Mm. You have to, or you don't know what's helping and what's not. And that's why people get themselves into situations where they don't know what's helping and what's not. And they just go and they start doing stuff and they're like, all right, this isn't working. I literally test every single input when the goal is decreased pain. You have to. You have to know what's doing what. And sometimes it is quite sensitive. I told the story in the last podcast, working with one of our students. We started this new thing in the membership where we do like these mini sessions on them and we run them through the same process. And basically, the end result for our mini session for one of our students was a seemingly simple drill where she walked through her living room back and forth. So this was a gait assessment, but it became the drill while saying every other day of the week in her head. And then I had her combining that with left index finger figure eights. Okay. Index finger figure eights with multitasking during gait. And her neck range of motion improved 20 degrees on both sides. And she reported that she had much less tension through her thoracic spine than she had had in a while. Now, that's weird if you've never seen neuro before, okay? Think about all the things she could have done, and if she wasn't testing the responses, she wouldn't know that result was right there. It was right there with a couple of little simple things, and the reason we chose those things is because we did some neuro testing to find out what her cerebellar patterns were. And we learned some stuff about her cortex. And so we created some really simple things for her. And sure enough, that started moving the needle. So if the goal is pain or tension, or you're trying to improve a movement that doesn't feel good, you have to test every input. Because you want to know what else happened in that session? I had her do saccades, so jumping her eyes back and forth. She already told me she was a little sensitive with vision drills. So I didn't want to challenge her too much and risk really regressing her. So I had her do visual saccades with her eyes closed, imagining targets. And in one of the directions, she got worse. So that result that we got initially from her neck range of motion went away with the threatening eye movement. Now that's problematic, and I have to think about that throughout the training process, because if moving your eyes to the left, let's say, is problematic and causing you a regression, well, we need to get an improvement in that at some point, because how many times do you need to move your eyes to the left in your life? Mm-hmm. A lot. And if that's going to jack up your threat levels and lead to more pain issues, that's problematic. For where we are in that process, right, with a single session, we need to do some high payoff things, which is why we put that drill together. So more of a less intense, a little bit more of a bottoms up approach at that point. But that it's something, it's interesting to consider, like, that level of sensitivity can really throw things off. So if you're not testing every input, it's going to be hard. That's why we're so good at working with pain. Seriously, I don't have that specialized of tools. Like you can learn all this stuff. Like go on YouTube. Every single thing that I'm teaching, you can find on YouTube. The thing that sets us apart from what other practitioners are doing that are not working like this with applied neuro is we test everything. That is literally the cornerstone of our entire philosophy. So we actually know exactly what every single input is doing. And the power of that is incredible, right? The power of how you can sort of put things together and make a stimulus stronger, or learn that someone has a problem moving their eyes in one direction and then figure out a strategy to deal with that over time, possibly even avoid it in drills during like more threat reduction based work. It's super powerful. So yeah, it's this, going back to the question, it's all goal dependent. And you will open up a can of worms with lots of testing and lots of options when you're doing pretty deep neuro work. That's just how it goes. But that's freeing eventually if you're learning this work, because then you learn, oh, I've got unlimited tools. Like I didn't feel that way early on in my career. I felt limited with my tools because I was. But then as you learn more about neuro and you start to look at each tool through a brain-based lens, it's freeing. Like I know I can find something to help an issue eventually, right? Because there's so many options, but that can be overwhelming at first. So this is goal dependent. General training, no, I do not fanatically test. If I'm coaching someone, I fanatically observe. But if the goal is to help someone get out of pain, I fanatically test because I need to know their reassessment. Yeah.
So for like a session where you're thinking about pain as the primary goal, you might just be doing a battery of assessments, trying different things, seeing what sticks, taking notes. You might do that. I don't know how long that phase usually lasts, but at some point, I imagine you might have found this is the stack. These are my high payoff drills.
Right.
And then when you start transitioning to like just training, you're incorporating those, but you're not necessarily assessing every single thing you're doing once you're out of that like diagnostic period.
You know what happens?
Does that sound right?
Yeah, you know what happens? And I almost hate this. Right? So you put in all this work when you're working with somebody to figure out all these high payoff drills, and you get to a point where you've got it pretty dialed and you know what's helping them and they know what's helping them and they're practicing and everything's moving in the right direction. And you feel like this is cool. Like I know something. Like I know something about this person and I figured out what helps them. And you're moving them through, this is the threat reduction phase. Their pain is decreasing. They're beginning to move better. And then all of a sudden, they don't need anything that you created. Nothing. And you take a step back and you're like, we did all this for this long. And it was so precise. Like it had to be this input, that input. We had to avoid this other thing. Couldn't do that, or that would interfere. And you move them through and they're consistently practicing. And then all of a sudden one day it's like all that work doesn't matter anymore. Now it mattered because it got them there. But everything you thought you knew doesn't matter anymore because they don't need it. It's like all of a sudden they're healthy enough where they don't need stacking. They don't need this nerdy neuro stuff and combining these inputs and all this stuff that you kind of almost put on a pedestal in the process. And then one day it's obsolete. At least it feels that way. And I've had a lot of that, now as a coach, I've learned it's a victory when you get to that point. And then all of a sudden your client goes from the person who was, quite sensitive to certain drills to now it's more general training, and you can kind of throw at them whatever you want and they don't really regress. I mean, that's the goal, right? And I've had that experience in my own body a lot where like one example is early on when I was learning all of the joint mobility drills. for, I want to say like 6 years. Basically, no joint mobility drill was ever bad for me. I just focused on them because they felt good. Mm-hmm. I felt tension reducing. My performance was improving. I felt like chronic tension going away. And I put a lot of time into being able to do those drills precisely. Like really some of them are quite challenging, moving your neck in certain ways and, everything, your jaw. And I felt dependent on those drills for a while to feel good. And then one day, I say one day, this wasn't one day, but it feels like one day, especially when I'm thinking about it. It's like all of a sudden I didn't need to feel dependent on that stuff anymore. And rather than doing it every day, which was common for me, I was checking in with that stuff twice a week. And now, this is much fast forward now, gosh, it's been like 15 years since I started that stuff. I only do the drills when I feel I need them. But every time I go back to doing it, I still have the coordination, which is cool. So I built those maps and they exist. And I check in with them generally as part of my warm-ups when I'm exercising and stuff. But I'm not like, oh, this left knee circle is life-changing, because that's what it felt like when I first learned it. But I'm just kind of like, all right, that circle's good. I'm still smooth. Range of motion's good. Like, next drill. And I'm just checking in, right? Because it's healthy and it's good for your joints. But it's funny how that can work. And that same thing happens with clients all the time. It's like you're doing all this fanatical, deep neuro work, and then boom, don't need that anymore. Which is typically a good sign.
Yeah. Yeah, like go forth, go
exactly.
Practice the sport you want to do, train.
I tell our students all the time, neuro was never the goal.
Yeah.
We never wanted to regress it to this ever. Like, it's not the goal, but we need to call on those tools to get us through pain issues, helping with chronic health problems, whatever the case might be, even very specific performance deficits. Neuro was never the goal, but it's a strong tool set that helps us get through those things. And then eventually your goal is that you don't need it anymore.
Well, that's awesome. Another amazing group of questions. So thank you. Keep your eyes peeled for wherever.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Taylor and Alicia post those question requests. And yeah, that's what we've got for today.
Cool. And there's plenty more that we can carry over, I think, right?
That's right. Nice. We've still got a lot to go through. So we'll be doing this again.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for the questions. And sorry, Alicia couldn't be here today. I know that, we had mentioned in our community that Alicia was going to be here with me, and we'll make that happen in the near future, hopefully, because I think that would be a nice thing to get in the schedule more consistently. But it all depends on our daughter's school schedule and all of that. This was the last week of her kind of summer school / camp. So there may be a gap, but you will see Alicia again. While I'm thinking about it, those of you who, if you're listening to this Q&A episode, to me, what that means is you like this podcast a lot. People who have not experienced the podcast yet, or they have not really leaned into our content, they're probably not going to listen to us talk about these questions for an hour. So thank you guys for being here and for being strong supporters of the podcast. And if you haven't done so already, it would really mean a lot to us if you gave the podcast a review. That goes a really, really long way. So those of you who have already done that, we really appreciate that support. All right. That's it for today's Q&A episode. We will be back soon.